Hi everyone, I'm Andy and this is the AI Breakdown. Welcome to your weekly news edition, where I'll cover what happened in AI last week and why it matters. First up, Apple opened WWDC on the 8th of June, and for once the Siri news actually felt like the main event. Tim Cook used his final keynote as CEO to unveil a rebuilt Siri with a cloud layer powered by a custom 1.2 trillion parameter model built with Google's Gemini team. Bloomberg puts the deal at roughly $1 billion a year. Like I've said in past episodes, that's a serious admission about where Apple thinks the fastest route to a usable assistant sits, and it's long overdue. Back in 2024, Apple promised a Siri that could read your personal context, understand what's on screen, and act across your apps. The flight tracking demo was the showcase, then it went quiet. 2 years and a rented Gemini model later, it's finally here. So what does that actually look like in the product? Some of it's just new packaging. Siri gets a standalone app, a chatbot-style interface, a dynamic island indicator, and a system-wide search or ask gesture. But the rest is that 2024 list made real. It uses personal context across your email, photos, files, and calendar. It reads what's on screen, and it acts across apps. The more interesting piece for developers is Siri extensions. Apple is letting third-party AI models plug into the Siri surface, with Gemini, Claude, and ChatGPT available at launch. Gemini is the default cloud brain, but Claude and ChatGPT can sit inside the same interface if users choose them. That matters because Anthropic and OpenAI get access to Siri, but not the default slot. That makes Siri a kind of model marketplace, wrapped in Apple's usual distribution muscle. And that distribution is the story. Apple has around 2.5 billion active devices, but my read is that Apple has decided the assistant mode isn't the model. It's the permission layer, your screen, your files, your calendar, and the default habit on the device. It turns Gemini from Google's product into Apple's plumbing. For teams building mobile or Mac workflows, I'd watch the Siri extensions API closely. The question is whether your product can become an action inside Siri rather than another app someone has to remember to open. If Siri can read context and execute across apps, that's where the workflow shifts from search box to agent. This episode is sponsored by Notify Technology, a health and safety software partner, helping teams run incident management, audits and inspections, and risk assessments in one place. And with Notify Spark, their AI companion, they're streamlining incident reporting and investigations, saving time, reducing admin load, and helping teams act faster. Learn more at notifytechnology.com. Back to the news. Microsoft held Build 2026, their annual developer conference, on the 2nd and 3rd of June in San Francisco, and the message was pretty clear. Unlike Apple, Microsoft wants more control over its AI supply chain. It announced 7 proprietary models under the MAI brand, all built in-house. The flagship is MAI Thinking One, their first reasoning model. It's got 35 billion active parameters. The context window's 256,000 tokens, big enough to hold a few hundred pages at once. Microsoft says that in a blind test, independent raters preferred it to Claude Sonnet 4.6. It also says the model matches Claude Opus 4.6 on SWE Bench Pro, a coding benchmark. Both are Microsoft's own claims, so treat them with a pinch of salt for now. The wider MAI line covers coding, image generation, speech-to-text, and text-to-speech. So Microsoft now has an in-house stack across the main enterprise AI modes, rather than depending entirely on OpenAI and others for the smartest bits of the product. Mustafa Suleyman also claims that, after fine-tuning from McKinsey, MAI beat GPT 5.5 with 10 times better cost efficiency. Again, treat that as a claim until customers see it in production, but it's exactly the sort of number people will latch onto. Microsoft also announced Scout, its first true autopilot. This introduces a new category of always-on, autonomous agents that possess independent memory and execute complex tasks natively behind the scenes. So unlike traditional assistants that wait for commands, Scout is designed to proactively handle workplace tasks across Teams, Outlook, OneDrive, and SharePoint. Microsoft says it can organize calendars, prepare meeting briefs, track projects, and manage routine work behind the scenes. Microsoft's also got a new thing called Project Solara. It's what they're calling a chip-to-cloud platform built for devices that run AI agents instead of apps. They demoed 2 bits of hardware, a wearable badge running on Qualcomm chips and a desk companion on MediaTek. Microsoft isn't making these itself. It hands reference designs to other manufacturers and decides which chips are allowed in. The idea is simple enough. Instead of opening an app or a browser tab, you talk to an agent and it does the task. The device is just a window. The actual intelligence sits in the cloud on Azure. Worth being clear about who this is for, though. It's not a consumer gadget that follows you around all day. It's enterprise kit. The first pilots are with Best Buy, CVS, Levi's and Target. Microsoft also showed off the Surface RTX Spark Dev Box. It's a small desktop machine aimed at developers who want to build AI stuff locally, on their desk, instead of renting cloud compute by the token. The pitch is the interesting bit. Cloud AI gets expensive fast when every experiment is a per-token bill. So this is a bet on hybrid. Run the small stuff locally, reach for the cloud only when you have to. There were Windows changes for developers too. Linux-style command line tools called curutils, those are shipping now, a built-in way to run Linux containers inside WSL, and an AI-powered terminal that helps debug and run multi-step jobs, though that one's still experimental. Put it together, and the message is hard to miss. For years, developers have drifted off to Mac and Linux. Microsoft's trying to remove the reasons to leave. And then there's GitHub Copilot, the most widely used AI programming assistant in the world. GitHub has shipped a native Copilot desktop app on Windows, macOS, and Linux. It's in technical preview for now, and appears to be their attempt to keep up with the likes of Claude Code and Codex, marking a shift from passive, in-editor, autocomplete to agent-native development. So the point isn't another chat window, it's somewhere to run several coding agents at once. Then there's the model underneath. Microsoft also launched its own coding model, MAI Code 1 Flash. It's beginning to roll out to Copilot Free, Student, Pro, Pro Plus, and Max plans. Availability will start with a limited set of users and expand gradually over the coming weeks, with this becoming the default model in GitHub Copilot. And Microsoft claims their new model outperforms Claude Haiku 4.5 across a range of recognized industry benchmarks. On paper, it's a clean strategy. Own the model, own the chips, own the editor, own the place the code already exists. So this means a smaller supply chain and fewer people taking the cut. For me, the timing is interesting. Arguably, Copilot is already losing its best users. The developers doing serious agentic work are moving to Anthropic's Claude Code, which shows a clear lead over the competition in terms of positive sentiment on the State of AI Developer Survey. And those are the same users who just got hit with the new usage-based pricing on Copilot, which we talked about last week. So, Microsoft is asking the people most likely to leave to absorb a pricing change and a model transplant in the same quarter. That's the bet. Pull everything in-house, lower your own costs, and hope the people paying the most don't walk while you're doing it. Copilot still has the distribution, nearly 5 million paying subscribers, and it sits right inside GitHub where the world's code already is. But distribution is what you lean on when you're no longer the tool people reach for first. And right now, on the hard problems, a lot of developers are reaching for something else. And that vendor risk thread also leads into Washington. Over the past few months, we've talked about Anthropic being pushed out of federal classified work. This week, the US government story moved in a very different direction. On the 5th of June, President Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One that the US government is discussing a direct equity stake in OpenAI. His line was, "There are concepts where pieces could be given to the American public, where the American public essentially becomes a partner." CNBC, TechCrunch, and Crypto Briefing all confirmed that talks have been running for more than a year. The structure they're discussing works like this. OpenAI hands equity to the federal government rather than selling it. That seeds a proposed public wealth fund. OpenAI is valued privately at about $850 billion, and the reporting says it could go public as early as September. Bernie Sanders has gone further. His proposal is a one-time 50% tax on OpenAI, Anthropic, and xAI, paid in stock instead of cash. That would put half of each company in public hands. The politics are unusual. The left wants public ownership to capture economic gains, and impose accountability. The right is talking about sovereignty over strategic technology. So there's different motivators with a similar structure at the end. There's a business problem sitting underneath that. A government shareholder would also be a regulator, a buyer, and a competition policy actor. That creates obvious tension. The same kind of question follows straight away. What happens when the government is customer, rule setter, and partial owner of a supplier bidding for contracts? So here's the shape of it. The same government that spent the spring trying to push Anthropic out of federal work is now talking about owning a piece of OpenAI. One lab it tried to lock out, another it may end up part owning. My read is simple. If the government holds equity in OpenAI, OpenAI becomes the safer political choice in procurement. The technical choice may point the other way. That's the gap every rival buyer and investor now has to price in. That surge in AI spend is also showing up at IPO scale. A few weeks back, we covered SpaceX and Anthropic's $45 billion compute partnership as part of the AI IPO race. Now the roadshow is live, and the numbers are frankly hard to say out loud without checking them twice. This is no longer just a rocket company listing. It's a test case for how public investors price AI compute demand. SpaceX launched its IPO roadshow on the 4th of June, a few days earlier than expected. It's offering about 557 million shares at $135 each, aiming to raise $75 billion at a valuation of about $1.75 trillion. Musk is also reportedly reserving up to 30% of the IPO shares for retail investors, roughly 3 times the usual 5 to 10% allocation. That widens access, but it also raises the question of whether valuation risk is being pushed onto less experienced buyers. Pricing is expected after trading closes on the 11th of June, with first trading on Nasdaq targeted for the 12th under ticker SPCX. If it completes a target, it would pass Saudi Aramco's 2019 raise by more than 2.5 times. That would make it the largest IPO in recorded history. The business is now 3 disclosed segments. Starlink's profitable, with about $1.2 billion of operating income in Q1 and just over 10 million subscribers across 164 countries. Launch in space is still described as loss-making, with Starship R&D identified as part of that segment. Then there's SpaceX AI, the former XAI, which posted about $820 million of Q1 revenue against a roughly $2.5 billion operating loss. Put simply, that AI unit is losing about $3 for every $1 of revenue right now. Anthropic is paying SpaceX $1.25 billion a month for compute, adding up to about $45 billion through May 2029. So this IPO is now being priced as an AI infrastructure platform alongside the rockets and broadband. My concern is that investors aren't really being asked to value rockets, broadband, and AI separately. They're being asked to believe a handful of enormous compute contracts can carry a trillion-dollar infrastructure story. That's a much more fragile bet than the headline valuation makes it sound. Analysts are skeptical of the valuation. Morningstar values the whole company at $780 billion, roughly half the target, and calls XAI's economic moat indeterminate and a material threat of value destruction. For OpenAI and Anthropic, this is the first major public market test of how investors price AI infrastructure demand. It's a test of whether Musk's retail investor following can help support a roughly $1.75 trillion story. Away from the public market mega deals, Meta made a more practical move this week. On the 3rd of June, at its Conversations conference in London, it launched Meta Business Agent globally, across WhatsApp Business, Instagram DMs, and Messenger. The reach here is the whole point. WhatsApp alone has more than 3 billion users in over 180 countries. Then you add Instagram and Messenger on top. The agent can answer customer questions, recommend products from a catalog, book appointments, qualify leads, and close transactions, all without a human stepping in, though a business can set the point where one does. Meta's been running versions of this in markets like India and Mexico for a while, and it says more than 1 million businesses were already using earlier chatbot versions on WhatsApp and Messenger before this launch. The Vivid version is a small retailer setting up an AI sales rep inside the same WhatsApp thread where customers already ask about sizes, stock, delivery, returns, and appointments. There's no new app to install, the conversation is already happening there. For larger firms, Meta is wiring the agent into systems like Shopify, Zendesk, and Shopee. It's also started testing an overnight briefing that summarizes the chats you missed. And further out on the roadmap, there's market research, calendar management, and surfacing businesses directly in WhatsApp search. That pushes Meta closer to customer service and commerce software, layered on top of its messaging footprint. And I think the underestimated threat here isn't that Meta suddenly becomes a better CRM than Salesforce. It's that small businesses may never leave the thread in the first place. If discovery, support, payment, and follow-up all happen inside WhatsApp, Meta owns the counter, not just the doorway. There's no upfront cost to start. Paid tiers are coming through WhatsApp Business Premium, and large enterprises get billed per token. So the same usage-based pricing theme keeps coming back. The free entry point gets adoption moving. The metered layer is where governance will matter. With that theme parked, let's rattle through a few more before we wrap up. First, OpenAI released Dreaming v3 on the 4th of June, which is the biggest ChatGPT memory update since launch. It automatically updates memories as time passes, so a future trip becomes a past trip once it's happened. ChatGPT also introduced lockdown mode. It restricts live web browsing, deep research, agent mode, file downloads, and some web-derived image support. The point is to reduce prompt injection data exfiltration risk. In plain English, that's the risk that a malicious web page or file quietly tricks the model into leaking data. Active Sessions now lets users review open sessions and sign out remotely as well. Alibaba's Qwen 3.7 Max is also getting traction. It launched at Alibaba Cloud Summit in Hangzhou on the 20th of May, with a 1 million token context window and a 90% cached input discount. That brings cached input down to about 25 cents per million cached tokens. The list rate is $2.50 per million input tokens and $7.50 per million output tokens. OpenRouter lists Qwen 3.7 Max at roughly half of Claude's Opus 4.7's list price. On the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index, it scores 56.6. That's above Gemini 3.5 Flash and less than a point behind Claude Opus 4.7. For long context coding and agentic workloads, that's the kind of pricing pressure Western labs will notice. Regulated buyers still need to think carefully about data governance and geopolitics. OpenAI also released a capability update to GPT-Rosalind on the 3rd of June. It's the company's life sciences research model, using 31% fewer tokens than GPT 5.5 while improving drug discovery and genomics accuracy. Named customers include Amgen, Moderna, the Allen Institute, and Thermo Fisher Scientific. This becomes more material if deployment revenue appears in OpenAI's public IPO documents. And that's all for this week's AI Roundup. If you found value in this breakdown, please leave a rating and hit subscribe. See you next week.